Most days, the things that put us in danger do not look dangerous at all. A delivery at the door, a quick marketplace pickup, a sick stranger asking for help, a buzzer in an old apartment building, a favor for a neighbor that should take 10 minutes. That's what makes stories like these so uncomfortable. They start in places where we are supposed to feel normal, busy, maybe a little annoyed, but safe. And then one detail shifts. Someone knows too much. A door does not close the way it should. A harmless errand turns into a situation where you suddenly realize you are being watched, tested, or followed. Today, we're getting into a batch of true feeling horror stories about ordinary access turning into something much darker. If you enjoy these narrations, leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. Now get comfortable and let's begin with the first story. My mom's surgery was supposed to be boring. Hip repair, not a full replacement. A few rough weeks, the surgeon said, and then she'd be moving around again. It felt different at 6:20 every morning in her kitchen, sorting pills before my first call. I moved into her house temporarily. I was just staying until she could get to the bathroom at night without another fall. Her house is on a quiet small town street. One-story, narrow driveway, little porch, old brass chain on the front door. No doorbell camera. Porch light worked when it felt like it. The neighbors' cameras caught the driveway, not the porch. The pharmacy delivery became routine fast. It was the old local pharmacy downtown. Regular orders came sealed in brown paper bags with a receipt on the side. They were supposed to leave them on the small table by the front door during the delivery window. If something needed a signature, they called first. The driver was probably late 30s. My mom called him that nice young man. At first, he seemed fine. He put the bags on the table instead of tossing them on the steps. I appreciated it. He knocked on the side door. We use it when I come in with groceries, but deliveries don't go there. I was on a work call, so it took me a second to place the sound. When I opened it, he was standing there with a pharmacy bag and that polite smile people use when they want you to treat something odd, like help. Figured this might be easier for your mom, he said. Less walking. I said, thanks. Technically, he was right. The kitchen was closer to her chair, but he had to come up the driveway past my car and around the side path. I told myself Mom might have mentioned it. About a week later, he came back almost an hour after a delivery. No package. He said he wanted to make sure the bag hadn't gotten wet. There had been no rain. The bag was already inside. I stood there with one wet hand from the sink, trying to decide if I was allowed to be annoyed. He said some paper bags had been tearing lately. I said we had it and shut the door. After that, I started noticing that he noticed things. Working from here today? If my car was in the driveway? Early morning? If it wasn't, even though I had slept there and left before 6. Once I got stuck late at work and Mom opened the door herself, in her robe, Walker half behind her, I snapped at her. She said she was recovering, not helpless. She was right. After that, he stopped just dropping things off. He lingered. He asked if it was hard going back and forth and if I was sleeping okay on the couch. I had not told him that. Mom might have. Then one afternoon, while I was standing right there, he told my mom, "Now don't get up more than you have to if your daughter isn't here." He said it kindly. That was the problem. After that, I changed small things. I kept the chain on when I answered. I moved the table closer. I asked for lunch delivery windows. Then he started getting weird about the procedure. A refill that should have been left on the table was suddenly better handed over directly. Another time, he said he needed a signature, but the pharmacy had not called, and nothing was different on the receipt. I signed anyway because a meeting was starting. "Keeping Fort Knox in there now?" he said once. I made some joke about old locks, but I kept my foot behind the door while I took the bag. I hated that I did that. The car comments kept coming. "You're here today? Back again? Didn't see your car this morning." Not every time, but enough. I kept telling myself, a delivery driver sees driveways. Then, one afternoon, he left a bag so close to the front edge of the porch that Mom almost went out after it with her walker. The little table was right there, empty. I called out for her to stop, sharper than I meant to, and she froze, with one slipper already over the threshold. The chain was still on, but she had tried. That was enough. Even then, a complaint felt awkward. No porch camera, no direct threat, no forced door. The neighbor's camera might show the driveway, not the drop-off. Every detail could be explained away. The thing that finally made it not awkward anymore started with a back order, which still makes me mad. The pharmacy left a voicemail that day saying one item from Mom's order hadn't come in. They might send it separately when it arrived. I assumed that meant a normal delivery window. That evening, Mom went to bed early after PT. I gave her the night pills, set her walker near the bed, and went back to work emails in the kitchen. Then someone knocked. Not rang, knocked. The porch light worked that time. Through the glass pane, I saw him with a small pharmacy bag. I opened the door with the chain on. He held up the bag. "Got the rest of your mom's order," I said. "You can leave it on the table." He didn't. He just stood there with it pinched between two fingers. "It's the remainder," he said. I should hand it over. I told him again to set it down. I was clear. Then he stepped closer and pushed the bag toward the opening. It happened in this dumb, clumsy way. His hand came through the gap, just enough that the paper bag folded against the edge of the door and jammed there. I tried to pull the door back, and it wouldn't close. His boot was still outside, the worn rubber toe right below the door. The chain went tight. I heard the plate tick against the old wood. I put my shoulder into the door. I leaned hard because the door had started to give, and suddenly, I understood how little space there was between on the chain and open. He said, "I need to see the recipient." "My mother's asleep," I said. "Leave it there. I'm calling the pharmacy." He tilted his head and tried to look past me toward the bedrooms. Then he said, like it was nothing, "Well, you're not always here overnight." I stopped pulling at the bag, the side door, my car, the couch comment. All those little things. I let go of the bag. He still had it, so it pulled free when I shoved the door shut. The chain scraped, and for 1 second I thought it might catch wrong. But the door closed. I locked the deadbolt and stood there listening. He knocked once more. Softer. I didn't answer. I called the pharmacy from the kitchen, keeping my voice low, because Mom was asleep, and I sounded insane. That's the part people don't understand when they say you should report things sooner. It came out as the side door, the no rain check, the fake signatures, my car, him looking inside, and that sentence about me not always staying overnight. The manager started with normal manager words. Maybe there was confusion because of the back order. Then she checked the ticket and said the item was marked for the next day's run, not that night. That was the first time her voice changed. I repeated what he had said about me not being there overnight. She didn't promise some big investigation. She just got quieter and said they would put someone else on Mom's route, for now. Mom woke up while I was still holding the phone. She asked who had come by, and I told her it was a mix-up from the pharmacy. I didn't want to scare her before I knew what to call it. I drove downtown myself, or Mrs. Keller grabbed things when she was already out. No one gave me a clean explanation. Mom got better. Not fast, but enough that I went back to my own apartment. 2 weeks later, I stopped by after work with groceries. It was getting dark, and when I turned onto her street, a dark sedan was sitting near the corner with its headlights off. Same dull shape as the pharmacy delivery car, one brake light weaker than the other. Nothing I could prove. I parked straight in front of the porch, went inside fast, checked the chain, and told my mother not to open the door for anyone anymore, even if the bag looked like it came from the pharmacy. I mean, this is exactly the kind of thing where people talk themselves out of trusting their gut because each individual moment sounds small. But put it together, and it's not small at all. A delivery driver does not need to know who is sleeping on the couch, who is home overnight, when the car is gone, or whether an elderly woman is alone. That is not customer service. That is someone testing access. And the fact that he used politeness and concern to push past boundaries makes it worse, because that's how people get frozen into being nice when they should be shutting the door. I'm just glad she finally called the pharmacy before it got any further. Now, on to the next one. Back when this happened, I was taking pretty much any side work I could get. Punch lists, trim repairs, basement framing, whatever paid. I was 24, and every tool I bought had to make sense. I had a basement build out starting the next morning, and I needed a real laser level. Not my cheap cabinet, one, but a rotary setup with receiver and tripod. Buying new was too much. Renting one would have eaten the profit. So I checked Marketplace at lunch. I found one that looked right. Hard case, charger, receiver, tripod, laid out on a garage floor. The price was good, but not crazy good. That made me trust it, which sounds dumb now. It looked like a guy clearing out tools, not bait. The seller messaged short. He said he used to do remodel work, moved out of his old shop, and the tools were in storage. He could meet that evening, because he was sorting the unit anyway. I sent a screenshot to a guy I worked with, mostly to ask if the model was worth it. I didn't send him the address. I wasn't thinking safety. I was thinking about the job tomorrow. He wrote back, yeah, if it's clean, grab it. Self-storage didn't feel weird. I knew guys who kept compressors and boxes of screws in those places. Tools in a storage unit sounded more normal than tools in some stranger's living room. The place was out by the highway, where our town gets ugly, near a car wash and fenced lots. The office was closed, blinds down, cameras under the awning, and a keypad at the gate. Normal chain storage look. The seller waited in an older gray pickup. Hoodie, ball cap, work boots. Tired and irritated. Not dangerous. He punched in the gate code fast and waved me through before the gate finished sliding open. Inside, a few work vehicles were parked along the rows. No people that I could see, but the vehicles helped. I asked if he wanted to bring the kit to my van. He said no, the tripod was inside and the charger was plugged in. He also kept looking past me toward the rows and the gate. I gave it the boring explanation because I wanted the deal to work. His unit wasn't outside. He drove around the first building and stopped by a glass door into an indoor section. That bugged me a little, but not enough. Indoor units are normal. Annoying, but normal. The hallway smelled like dry concrete and old cardboard. The motion lights came on late, and the highway got muffled. We walked almost to the end. A flatbed cart with a bad wheel sat near one wall, and I had to turn sideways to get around it. His door was one of the last ones. He rolled it up only to about chest height and said it stuck if he pushed it higher. Inside, it looked real enough. Totes, old tires, plywood scraps, a few tool cases. I remember thinking, okay, this is just a messy unit. Then he ducked under the door and dragged out the laser case. Right away, I knew it wasn't the one from the pictures. Different case. More beat up. Faded sticker half peeled off. One battery was off-brand, the tripod was cheaper, and the receiver wasn't there. I tried to keep my voice normal. I asked if maybe he grabbed the wrong case, then asked to check the model number, turn it on, see the serial. I just didn't want to pay real money for a half-wrong kit. He looked at me like I had called him a thief. Then he snapped the lid partway shut and said the photos were old. The kit was basically the same, and I had wasted his time making him drive out there. I said, yeah, I'm not going to take this one, as flat as I could. That was when it changed. Not loud, not dramatic. He didn't pull a weapon or anything. He just stepped into the hallway with me, pulled the roll-up door down a little more so the metal rattled, and left his hand on the bottom edge. It put him between me and the way out. He said I had made him come out, wasted his evening, and now I was acting like he was scamming me. I told him I wasn't saying that. I just didn't want that kit. He said, then make it right. At first, I thought he meant $20 for gas. Then he said I could leave something for his time or send a small deposit through Zelle and come back for the receiver later. Then he held out his hand and told me to show him my phone so we could figure it out. His hand wasn't in my face. It was close enough. If I took my phone out, I didn't know if I'd be the one holding it after that. I had the case by my boots, the bad cart behind my right hip, the wall on my left, and him standing in the only easy line back to the door. He didn't have to touch me. He just had to stay there. So I lied. I told him my buddy was up front by the gate with the rest of the cash. I said we were splitting the kit and I needed to bring him back before I sent anything. He said, "What, buddy?" I said the guy waiting up front. None of that was true. The guy from work had only seen a screenshot, and I didn't even know if he would answer if I called. But the seller looked down the hall toward the exit, and his hand came off the door. I started walking right then. Slow, still talking, like the deal was alive. The seller followed close enough that I heard his boots after every step. I did not run. Running would have turned it into what it already felt like. Outside, the office was still dark. Nobody by the gate. No one by my van. Nobody under the cameras. Just closed storage rows and highway noise past the fence. I got into my van, like I wasn't scared. Shut the door. Started it. I only hit the locks after my hand was already on the key. He had stopped near the corner of the row. I saw him in the mirror. I rolled toward the gate, and for one awful second, I thought I needed a code to get out. Then I saw the little exit sensor sign by the post. The gate started sliding, and I kept moving. He didn't chase me. He just watched the van, then looked at my plate, then turned back toward the indoor units. At home, I opened Marketplace. The listing was gone. The messages were still there, sort of, but his profile didn't lead anywhere normal anymore. No picture, no other items, nothing useful. I didn't file anything. People will say I should have. But what was I going to report? A bad listing and a guy standing too close in a storage hallway? For days, that address sat in my navigation history, under real job sites. And my old tripod stayed in the back of the van, because I never did replace it. Every time I dragged it out, I saw that narrow strip of concrete between his storage unit and the way out. This is one of those situations where the scam is not even really about the tool anymore. The fake listing is bad, obviously, but the real problem is getting someone into a controlled space where they feel boxed in and pressured to pay just to leave. That is not a misunderstanding. That is intimidation, and I do not blame the narrator for not reporting it right away, because from the outside it sounds like a guy stood too close in a hallway. But when you're there, you know when the whole room changes. The common sense rule here is simple. No deal is worth following a stranger deep into a storage building alone. Seriously, that could have gone so much worse. I still do this thing now where the second I pick up a prescription, I hide the bag before I even start the car, under the seat, in the diaper bag, in the trunk, if I have time. Anywhere but sitting out with that little receipt stapled to the top. I know that sounds paranoid. This happened about 3 weeks ago. My son had a fever, daycare sent him home, and our pediatrician had no openings, so I took him to the urgent care in the strip mall off Briar Creek. Children's clinic, pharmacy, convenience store across the lot. That place. The visit dragged. The doctor looked in his ears, sent the prescription over, and I stood in the pickup line with my son, half asleep, on my shoulder. When we came out, I had his jacket and keys in one hand, and the clinic papers and white pharmacy bag in the other. The lot looked normal. Parents loading kids into car seats. Cars inching through the pharmacy drive-thru. Then I noticed a woman by the reserved parking sign. She was holding the metal post like she needed it to stand. Her hair was stuck to her face, and she had a little bandage in the bend of her arm, like after blood work. Sweaty gray around the mouth. She didn't look scary, she looked sick. She said, "Ma'am, I'm sorry. Can you help me real quick?" I almost said no. I had my kid with me. I was tired. But she didn't ask for money or a ride to some address. She just needed to get to the convenience store. Her sister was meeting her there. Her phone was dead. She was too dizzy to cross the exit alone. I told her I had my son with me, meaning no. She nodded and said, "That's why I asked you. You're a mom. You know how it is when your body just quits on you." I hate saying this, but that worked on me. My son started crying again. The bag was sliding down my wrist. His pacifier had fallen under the car, and an older couple was close enough to hear. Refusing felt public and mean, so I made rules in my head. Just to the store. No waiting. 2 minutes. I unlocked the car and told her she could sit in front because the car seat was in back. I buckled my son in first. Then I shoved the pharmacy bag between my purse and the center console, closer to my side than hers. I didn't think about it. I just put it there. She got in slowly, thanking me too many times, one hand on her stomach. Her eyes were closed when I backed out. For maybe 30 seconds, I thought I had done the decent thing. Then she said, "Actually, is there an ATM at that store?" Her sister wasn't answering, she said. She might need cash for a ride. Then it was just $20. Then she just needed me to stop long enough to check her card. It kept changing while I was trying to merge and watch my son in the mirror. I still didn't stop. Maybe that was stupid. Maybe it was just normal person brain. It didn't feel big enough to order a sick woman out. Then her eyes opened and went straight to the bag. She looked out the windshield again and whispered that she was nauseous, but her voice changed after that. Dry. Almost flat. "That from the pharmacy?" I said yes. For the baby, I said it was just medicine from urgent care. "Antibiotic?" I pretended to check traffic. She turned toward the console. "I had something done in there too. My back is killing me. They give you anything for pain or just kid stuff?" My son started crying harder. I told her I was taking her to the store, and that was it. A few seconds later, she said, "Can I just see the name? I'm not asking for it." That was when it finally caught up to me. She wasn't watching the road, and she wasn't looking for the store. I moved my elbow down over the bag. I tried to make it look casual, but she noticed. Her eyes came up to my face, and for 1 second, she didn't look sick at all. Then she leaned across the console. Not fast. She did it like it was normal, like she was only turning the bag to read the receipt, and I was being rude for stopping her. Her fingers caught the folded top of the paper. I pinned the bag against my purse with my elbow. My son was kicking his car seat by then, crying so hard he was coughing. We were stopped at a red light with cars on both sides. I remember the turn signal ticking like it was the loudest thing in the car. Her hand was still there, between us. She said, "Don't make me out to be some criminal." I told her to take her hand off my stuff. She did, but not right away. Then she sat back and looked out the windshield like I had embarrassed her. "I'm in pain," she said. "You don't understand. It's probably just amoxicillin anyway." I was already in the right turn lane. For one horrible second, I almost kept driving toward the ATM just to get her out, without making her angry. I know how that sounds. Then I saw the convenience store entrance ahead, 2 teenagers by the ice machine, and a man in a work shirt at the counter. I almost missed the turn. Someone honked when I cut in. My phone didn't unlock because my thumb was sweaty. I grabbed the bag in my right hand, kept the wheel with my left, and pulled up crooked by the front doors. I picked up my phone and started talking like I had already called my husband. "We're at the store," I said, "right at the front door. I'm getting out now." She immediately said, "No, not here. Pull around the side." That was the clearest she had sounded the whole ride. I parked by the entrance. I turned the car off, took the keys, and kept the bag in my hand. I didn't unlock all the doors, just hers. "I'm not driving anywhere else," I said. She stared at me like I had done something cruel. Then she opened the door slowly and got out. She looked at my son, then at the bag in my hand. She didn't go inside. She didn't go to the ATM. She walked between 2 parked cars and around the back corner of the store. I drove home shaking badly. I missed my own turn. Later, when my son was asleep, I posted in our neighborhood Facebook group, and then on Nextdoor. I just asked if anyone had seen a woman outside Briar Creek Urgent Care, asking for rides. The replies were messy. Someone had seen a woman like that outside another clinic. Someone said she asked for anything for pain. Someone else said maybe she really was sick. A few comments were gone by morning. The one I kept rereading was from another mom, 2 towns over. She said a woman had come up to her outside a clinic too, started by talking about her baby, and only after that asked if she had picked up any prescriptions. This one makes me angry because the narrator was trying to be decent, and someone used that against her. Asking a parent with a sick child for help, then slowly turning that into money, then prescriptions, then trying to grab the bag. That's not desperation in a harmless way. That is manipulation, and it is dangerous. And I think a lot of people, especially parents, know that pressure of not wanting to look cruel in public. But being kind does not mean handing over control of your car, your child's safety, or your medication. She did the right thing by stopping somewhere visible and ending it there. Sometimes the safest answer really is just no. And with that, let's move on. I was 8 when this happened, so I'm not going to pretend I remember every second perfectly. Some of it got filled in later, from what my parents told me. But the building, the door, and the buzzer are still clear. We lived in an old 4-story apartment building. Not a scary place, just old. The lobby had scratched mailboxes and a buzzer panel beside the front glass door, with paper labels behind cloudy plastic. Under our button was my mother's initial, her last name, and our apartment number. I walked past it every day and never thought about it. I didn't understand that any stranger could read that label and sound like he knew us. Our apartment was upstairs, near the end of the hall. We had a peephole and a chain lock. My mom was strict about the door, but the buzzer felt different. People buzz the wrong apartment all the time. Delivery drivers hit random buttons. Tenants forgot keys. Neighbors let people in without asking much. It was background noise, not the same as somebody standing at our door. On Sundays, I was usually awake first. My dad worked nights, and when he came home in the morning, we kept quiet. My mom might be in the laundry room at the store or downstairs talking to somebody. I don't remember where she was that day, which still bothers me. I remember cartoons playing low and cereal on the coffee table. We had a guinea pig named Daisy. Her cage was in the kitchen by the window because there wasn't another good place for it. The blinds were usually tilted open in the morning, just enough to let light in. I'd scoop pellets into her bowl and push hay through the bars while she squeaked like she was starving. That morning, I had fed Daisy, poured cereal, and kept the TV low. I was walking around with that little kid feeling that I was being responsible. Then the buzzer went off. It was loud and ugly, that flat sound from the intercom box by our door. I hated it because it made me jump, but it wasn't strange. I pressed the talk button. A man's voice came through the speaker. Fuzzy like all voices through that thing, but calm, maybe a little annoyed. He said he had a package for my mother. He used her name. At 8, that mattered to me. If an adult knew my mom's name, my brain put him in the probably allowed category. I hate admitting that, but that's how I thought. He said the front door wasn't catching right, or the buzzer wasn't unlocking it. I don't remember the exact words. He needed me to buzz him in so he could bring the package upstairs and leave it by our apartment door. I looked toward my dad's bedroom. This is the part I still feel embarrassed about. Waking him up over a package felt stupid. Not unsafe, just stupid. I pictured him coming out irritated, pressing the same button I could press myself. So I pressed it. The downstairs lock made its grinding buzz, then stopped. And nothing happened. No instant sign I had done something wrong. The cartoons kept playing. Daisy scratched around in her bedding. My cereal got soggy. I went back to the living room and tried to act like I had just done some tiny grown-up chore. Then someone knocked on our apartment door. Not the buzzer. The door. It was polite, just 2 or 3 taps. I looked through the peephole. The hallway had that dull yellow light our building always had, and a man was standing close enough that the peephole bent him around the edges. Dark jacket. No uniform. Nothing I could have described well. 5 minutes later. I didn't see a box. I wish I could say that scared me right away, but it didn't. Maybe he had set it on the floor. Maybe he was holding it low. Kids make adults make sense, even when the adult is the problem. He said through the door, "Can you open up for just a second?" His voice was closer now, less fuzzy, but still normal. He said people stole packages from the hallway and he needed to make sure it got inside. I looked back toward my dad's room. The TV was low behind me. I felt caught between 2 rules. Don't open the door. Don't wake Dad up for no reason. So I turned the lock and opened the door only as far as the chain would let me. The chain caught with that hard little snap, and suddenly he wasn't a voice anymore. He was right there in the crack. One eye, part of his mouth, his shoulder in that dark jacket. I told him my dad was sleeping and he could leave the package by the door. My voice was small. I was trying to sound like I knew what I was doing. He didn't step back. He said he couldn't leave it there. Then he told me to take the chain off for just a second so he could set it inside. I told him again that my dad was sleeping. He said, "You don't need to wake him up. You already told me he's asleep." I didn't like that, but my brain still tried to smooth it over. Adults talked like they were in charge. Then I started to close the door. Not slam it, I just pulled it inward so the gap would shut. His fingers came around the edge of the door. He didn't shove his arm in. he didn't yell. He just put his fingers there and pulled back a little, enough that the chain went tight and the door stopped moving. That was when I understood something was wrong. Not fully. My body got it first. I remember both hands on the knob, my socks slipping, the chain making this tight metal sound. He said, still almost calm, "Just open it. I'm not going to hurt you." I didn't say anything. He leaned closer and I could smell cold hallway air and cigarette smoke on his jacket. He said my mother's name again. Then he said I was being a good girl. I think I shook my head. I don't know if he could even see it. Then he said, "Go put the guinea pig's bowl down first if you need to. The cage by the kitchen window." I just stood there, not screaming, not crying, just standing there with my hands still on the door, trying to understand how a delivery man knew about our guinea pig. Not a pet, not a guess. Daisy's cage. The kitchen window. The bowl I had just filled. Then it hit me. I pulled the door inward as hard as I could. His fingers slipped away and I shoved it closed and turned the deadbolt. Then I ran to my dad's room. I climbed onto the bed and shook him. I was talking too fast, so of course he didn't understand me. He was half asleep, saying, "What? What are you saying?" While I tried to explain that the delivery man was at the door, but he had no box and he knew about Daisy. The Daisy part made no sense to him either. Then I said he had tried to make me take the chain off. My dad got up so fast, he hit his knee on the nightstand. He went to the front door barefoot in his t-shirt and work pants and looked through the peephole before opening it. Then he slid the chain off and pulled the door open hard. The hallway was empty. He checked both directions. I was crying by then, though I don't remember when I started. He told me to stay inside, but I stood in the doorway anyway and watched him go to the stairs. A minute later, I heard him running down heavy and fast. When he came back up, his face scared me more than his voice. He hadn't found anyone. The lobby was empty. He said later that while he was going down, he heard the front door click shut. That soft old building sound, when the lock finally catches. That was enough for him. He called 911, then my mother, then the property manager. My mom came back pale and furious. I answered the same questions until I got scared I was saying something wrong and started giving shorter answers. There was no useful footage. The building had a lobby camera, or at least a camera-looking dome, but the property manager said it either wasn't recording right or it was aimed more toward the mailboxes than the entrance. Later that day, my parents walked around the apartment differently. Like they didn't trust it anymore. They realized that from the stair landing in the other wing, or maybe from a window across the gap, you could see part of our kitchen when the blinds were tilted open. Not the whole kitchen, just the corner by Daisy's cage. Just enough. They never found the man. After that, the blinds stayed shut. Nobody got buzzed in unless an adult talked to them, and I wasn't allowed near the door when someone knocked. For a long time after that, I couldn't feed Daisy by that kitchen window without checking the hallway first and then the glass across from us. What gets me here is how clearly this man understood a child's trust and tried to weaponize it. He used the mother's name, the buzzer, the idea of a package, all these normal adult things that make a kid think, okay, maybe this is allowed. That is not some awkward delivery mix-up. That is predatory behavior. And the guinea pig detail is the part that proves how wrong it was, because he had been watching closely enough to know what was inside that kitchen. The narrator was 8, so none of this is on her. She followed enough of the rule to keep that chain on, and that may have saved her. Adults failed around that building. She didn't. Mrs. Hanley lived 3 houses down from me on a quiet old street. I wasn't close with her. She was just my elderly neighbor. We said hi at the mailbox, that kind of thing. When she fell in her house and got taken to the hospital, I ended up with her spare key. Her niece lived in another county, and Mrs. Hanley had a gray cat named Milton, who she worried about more than herself. An EMT brought the key over because she'd asked if I could feed him. Saying no felt mean. Before work and after work, I checked the food and water. Milton wasn't friendly, but if I tapped the spoon against his bowl, he came out every time. That night, I had just gotten home from a late shift. I changed into sweatpants and was about 10 minutes from being done with the world when my phone rang. No caller ID. I almost ignored it. It was Mrs. Hanley from the hospital. Her voice sounded smaller than usual. She kept apologizing, then finally said she was worried she hadn't closed the basement door. Not the front door. Not a window. The basement door. Milton liked to sneak down there when the furnace kicked on, and sometimes the door would swing almost shut behind him. She was scared he'd be trapped all night without water. I told her he was probably fine, but she kept saying the paramedics had moved fast, and she couldn't remember. I was annoyed. I was tired. It was wet outside, and I had already fed the cat. But the house was close, the key was by my front door, and telling an old woman in a hospital bed I couldn't spare 10 minutes felt worse than just going. So I drove over, even though walking would have taken about the same time. Mrs. Hanley's porch light was weak behind dirty glass. I parked at the curb, stepped around wet leaves, and let myself in. Inside, the house looked normal. Nothing was knocked over. The mail I'd brought in earlier was still on the hall table. The kitchen light was still on. His food bowl was near the back door, pushed a little from where I remembered it. But cats do that. I called his name, which was stupid, because Milton never answered to his name. He answered to food, so I spooned some into his dish and tapped the spoon against the rim. Usually he came out before the third tap. This time, nothing. I tapped again and listened. The fridge hummed. A car went by outside, slow, then kept going. No cat. I figured he was asleep hiding because of the ambulance, or mad because I'd come in late. Cats are weird. Old houses are weird. I checked his water and went to the basement door off the kitchen. It was old and heavy, painted white so many times, the edges looked rounded. It was closed. I pulled the knob just enough to make sure it had caught. It didn't move. That should have been the end of it. Basement door closed. Cat probably hiding. Call Mrs. Hanley. Go home, go to bed. But when I turned around, I glanced through the kitchen window. It looked out over her backyard. Small yard, sagging awning, trash bin by the sidewall. Low near the ground was one of the basement windows. It was open. Not all the way, just cracked outward a few inches from the bottom. Enough that I could see a black line behind the frame. For a second, I didn't think burglar. I thought great. Old house, problem. A latch popped, the rain did something. The only reason I remembered that window was because the day before, I dragged Mrs. Hanley's trash bin out from under that awning. The wheel had stuck in the mud, and I noticed the basement window because it looked painted shut. Now it was open. I looked back at the basement door, still closed. I looked at the food, still untouched. This is where I should have left. I know that. But I was still trying to keep it normal. A stuck window and a missing cat didn't feel like a police call. Not yet. So I told myself I'd just look from outside. I went out the back door with my phone flashlight on. The grass under the window looked pressed down, but the yard was always messy, and I had dragged the trash bin through there the day before. The window wasn't open enough for a grown person to climb through easily, I told myself. Then I looked longer and realized that wasn't really true. It was open enough to get fingers under it. Open enough that if the latch was weak, someone could maybe force it farther. I backed away. Basement door closed. Cat had food. Window weird, but maybe rain. I could call Mrs. Hanley from the car and say one of the basement windows looked like it shifted. That sounded reasonable, or reasonable enough. I went around to the front, digging for my car keys, and then I stopped. I had left the front door unlocked. Not just unlocked. I had left it pulled almost closed, but not clicked shut. And the open can of cat food was still on the kitchen counter. I suddenly pictured Milton knocking the can down, cutting himself on the lid. I know, it sounds stupid. But that was the kind of problem I was still letting myself have. So I pushed the front door open again. I didn't go all the way in. I kept one hand on the door and left it open behind me, like that made it safe. I stepped into the hall just far enough to see the kitchen light and the corner of the counter. The house was quiet. Then below me there was one short scrape. Not a crash, not footsteps, just a hard little metal sound like a shelf shifting on concrete or weight settling onto an old board. At the end of the hall, low to the floor, Milton was staring at the basement door and hissing. I backed out so fast I almost tripped over the threshold. I didn't slam the door. Some part of me thought making noise was a bad idea, which sounds ridiculous now, but that's where my brain went. I pulled it shut, missed the lock once, cursed, and had to steady my hand against the frame before the key went in. Milton was still hissing inside. I got into my car, locked the doors, and sat there at the curb with my phone in both hands. I could not make myself say the real sentence yet. Someone might be in Mrs. Hanley's basement. Across the street lived Mr. Rollins, the neighbor who had every tool in the world and complained while he fixed things but still fixed them. Calling him felt less official than calling the police, so I called him. His voice was thick with sleep, and I felt stupid immediately. I said I was at Mrs. Hanley's. One basement window was cracked open, and Milton was acting weird. Then I forced myself to add that I'd heard something downstairs. He was quiet for a second. "You inside?" I said no, I was in my car. "Stay there." He came out in jeans, work boots, and a jacket over a t-shirt with a big flashlight in one hand. He looked tired and annoyed, which honestly helped. We walked around the outside first. The grass under the basement window was mashed down in that same wet patch. In his flashlight, it looked worse than it had under mine. Not footprints, just grass pressed the wrong way and mud scuffed near the foundation. Mr. Rollins bent down and shined the light along the frame. He didn't touch it right away. Then he said the latch might have slipped, but he didn't sound very sure. We went in through the front door together. He had me stay behind him while he checked the first floor. Nothing was out of place. Milton had disappeared again. At the basement door, Mr. Rollins stopped and listened. That was the first time he seemed really uneasy. He opened the door slowly, and the smell came up first. Damp concrete, old laundry soap, furnace dust. He shined the flashlight down the stairs and called out, not loud, just enough. Nobody answered. We waited. I had my phone in my hand, with my thumb over the emergency call screen. Mr. Rollins called again, then went down 2 or 3 steps. I did not follow him. I stayed at the top, turned half away from the stairs. Mr. Rollins swept the light across the washer, the old shelves, and the furnace. Then he said, "I don't see anybody." From where I stood, I could only see pieces of the basement. A low laundry shelf under the back window. Dirt on the concrete ledge. An old washing machine pulled a little from the wall, leaving a narrow, dark gap behind it. That gap bothered me more than anything else down there. Mr. Rollins checked it because I asked him to. He had to turn sideways to look behind the washer, but there was nothing. No person, no shoes, no coat. No movement when the light crossed the floor. The shelf under the window was shifted crooked, like something had bumped it or dragged across it. There were wet smears of dirt on the ledge. Then his flashlight moved past the metal rack beside it, and I saw the glove. It wasn't directly under the window. It was off to the side by an old rack full of paint cans and yellowed plastic bins. A work glove. Brownish gray, dark and wet across the fingers. Mr. Rollins picked it up by the cuff and said Mrs. Hanley's late husband had kept half a garage worth of junk down there, and for all we knew, the glove had been there for 10 years. That should have helped. But the glove was wet, not damp from basement air. Wet, and the concrete around it was dry in patches, except where the glove had been touching it. We both looked at it for a while, without saying anything useful. Mr. Rollins closed the basement window from the inside. It took more force than I expected. The frame scraped hard before it shut. Then he wedged an old board between the window and the laundry shelf, so it couldn't be pushed open again from outside. He said Mrs. Hanley needed a handyman in the morning and probably a new latch. We did not call the police that night. I'm not proud of it, but that's what happened. Nobody had been seen. Nothing was missing. Mr. Rollins said we had an old glove, a bad latch, and 2 people spooking each other in a damp basement. So we left it at that. The window got fixed a few days later. Mrs. Hanley came home the next week with a walker, and she thanked me so many times I could barely look at her. For weeks after that, Milton would not cross the kitchen if the basement door was in view. He'd creep around the far side of the table, belly low, ears flat, watching that white painted door. Mrs. Hanley eventually put a box of newspapers in front of the basement door so Milton would stop sitting there and hissing into the crack. This is such a good example of why nothing happened does not always mean everything was fine. A basement window open, a missing cat, a sound from below, wet dirt, a wet glove. Maybe none of those things alone prove anything. But common sense says you do not keep walking deeper into an elderly neighbor's house at night when the signs keep stacking up. I get why she did it. She was tired, she felt responsible, and she didn't want to make a police call over something that might be nothing. But that's the trap. People wait for proof when what they actually have is danger. I'm glad she got out and called someone instead of trying to be brave alone. And that is where we're going to wrap up this one. Honestly, what made this batch so unsettling to me is how normal every situation felt at the start. None of these people were walking into some obvious horror movie setup. They were helping family, buying equipment, picking up medicine, answering a buzzer, feeding a neighbor's cat. Just regular life until someone crossed a line and made it unsafe. And I think that's why these stories stick a little harder. They remind you how quickly I'm probably overreacting can turn into, I should have trusted myself sooner. Which one of these bothered you the most? Let me know down in the comments because I'm genuinely curious where everyone lands on this batch. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and thank you so much for watching all the way through. I really appreciate it. Stay safe, trust your gut, and I'll see you in the next one.